Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I am talking about one of my all-time favorite heroes or heroines, Harriet Tubman. She is a national treasure. She's a world treasure. Now, she was known as the Black Moses because she rescued and saved close to 1,000 or more slaves in the course of her lifetime, primarily via the Underground Railroad system that she learned about, that she became aware of, and she endured herself first. So let's get into her story. Born a slave, Harriet Tubman's first encounter with the cruel, cruel world in which she lived was when she was age 5 or 6, and she was hired out to be a nursemaid for a young new mother. Her job was to take care of the baby and rock the baby while it slept, and if it woke up, she was whipped, lashed. Once before breakfast, she had been lashed 5 times. But there was no escaping it, although she tried. Once for 5 days, she hid in a pig pen. Unfortunately, starvation pulled her out, and she had to wear layers of clothes to protect her poor skin from these lashes. I can only imagine being that age and being scared out of your mind, and the trauma. These lashes that she had lasted her whole life. That's how bad these scars were. Then, when she was just a little bit old, she was hired out to check the traps for muskrats. And that was her job. She had to go out into the swampy fields even when she was sick. Once she had measles and she was ill, and they forced her out. Well, of course, she became so ill that she couldn't even work, and so she was brought back to her mother's house for a sweet time where she was mended back to health. Very little information on that. I don't think it lasted very long because soon she was hired out again. Now let's fast forward to age 12. At age 12, this is when the first major thing happened in her life. An adult male slave had escaped. They found him, they brought him back. Her and some other slaves were told to tie him up so that he could get lashed. Instead of tying this slave up, she refused. And as he bolted out the door, she blocked the door. And meanwhile, the slave owner took a 2-pound metal weight, aiming at the man, hit her in the head instead. And she went into a unconscious semi-coma state for 2 days without any medical care. After that, for the rest of her life, she suffered from narcolepsy and severe headaches, but also visions. And these visions became her guiding force, along with her faith in God, to help her complete her mission in this life. Interestingly enough, when she became ill again in 1849, she was so afraid of being sold, because they deemed her almost worthless or useless, that she started praying every night to God to have him change her master's ways and not sell her and not keep slaves. When she realized that was never going to happen, she actually prayed for his death, and a week later, he died. Later on, she expressed a little bit of remorse for that, but I find that extremely peculiar and interesting. Upon her master's death, though, of course, her chances of being sold were far greater. And she said, "There was one of two things I had a right to: liberty or death. And if I couldn't have one, I would have the other. She was hearing rumors of this underground railroad system, and eventually she made the move with her two younger brothers at age 27, and they were 19 and 25, to escape. They ran away. However, the two younger brothers, they were really scared, and they convinced her to go back. Well, not too soon after, she fled again, this time alone. She made her way up to Pennsylvania, and she was helped by the Religious Society of Friends, aka the Quakers. They had a huge sympathy for slaves and completely believed in the Golden Rule, which is also very commonly referred to by Frederick Douglass. The journey was between 5 days to 3 weeks, and nobody knows the exact route that she took. But to be sure, it was extremely dangerous, treacherous, and life-risking. She was guided by the North Star, and that was something that she had a vision about before embarking on this quest. And she was very, very in tune with her surroundings. She knew the marshes, she knew the backwoods. After reaching Pennsylvania and finally finding freedom, she stated this: "I looked at my hands to see if I was the same person. Now I was free. There was such glory over everything. I felt like I was in heaven." Frederick Douglass once hosted 11 of her fugitives, and they became friends. Two former slave abolitionists fighting for freedom, and they were very fond of each other. They respected each other a great deal. Over the course of 11 years, in 13 expeditions, she rescued over 70 slaves. It was a terrifying journey, but she said she never once had fear because she knew God was on her side. And this is why she became known as Moses, or the Black Moses, because she led people to the promised land of freedom. She sang versions of songs that were very, very coded messages, such as she also carried a revolver and was not afraid to use it. On one particular occasion, one of the slaves wanted to return home, and she pointed the gun at his forehead and said, "You either go or die," because it was way too risky. It would risk everybody's lives. She had to be a fierce leader. One of her most famous quotes was, "I never ran my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger," which was true, amazingly. In 1858, she became a Union Army scout, a nurse, and led an armed expedition with the white abolitionist named John Brown. When they did this at Harper's Ferry, they freed over 700 slaves. Unfortunately, John Brown was caught and hung. This was his life's mission, and you should read about him as well. He's amazing. He was also friends with Frederick Douglass, who he tried to convince to go with him on this expedition, but Frederick believed it was suicide, which turned out it was. And when they freed all these slaves at Harper's Ferry, she said they could have helped free more if they had known they were slaves. After John Brown's hanging, she stated, "He done more in dying than 100 men would in living." During her time as a nurse, she helped men with dysentery by gathering local plants and herbs and making remedies. And most of them had smallpox. And the fact that she never contracted it further made her seem like she was blessed by God. In the 1880s, she became very active in the women's suffrage movement, trying to get the right to vote for women, and she was a prominent figure in that respect as well. In 1896, she gave a speech at the National Association of Colored Women's Club. As Tubman aged into the 1890s, her head trauma from 12 years old, with the seizures, the headaches, the narcolepsy, was just increasing. And she actually had brain surgery, in which the doctor sawed my head open and lifted it, and now I'm more comfortable. She had received no anesthesia for this surgery. Instead, she wanted to bite down on a bullet, as she had seen the soldiers do when they were getting their limbs amputated. By 1911, she was so frail that she went to a rest home. And the day she died, her last words were, "I go away to prepare a place for you." She was penniless, and she had many supporters trying to donate some money for her. And she was buried with military honors. So this was my video to commemorate an amazing woman that I've always admired. And she helped free over 1,000 slaves. That was her life's work. And she was involved in so much more. She was honored while she was alive and more after her death. I'm just proud to present a little bit of this information to you guys, and I hope that you look up this amazing woman and see for yourself the amazing things that a human can do in the face of adversity when they have that willpower and that fight within them. She's an example that you can do anything you want if you really put your mind to it. I think that is one of the best examples of a human that I've ever read about. So with this, I say adieu to you, and go forth and be a good person.